Great to be with you, distinguished participants and performers, dear friends. Today is a day to remember sacrifices. It's a day to honor courageous action. Today is also a day of celebrating our common humanity and our determination to live up to the values and principles of the UN Charter, which I, by the way, always carry in my pocket. On this World Humanitarian Day, we pay tribute to the thousands and thousands of humanitarian workers and volunteers who risk their lives to deliver life-saving aid to people in need on the front lines of crisis and utter despair. Last year, 109 aid workers were killed, 110 were wounded, and 68 were kidnapped. Most of them worked in 5 countries: Afghanistan, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Today is also a day to show solidarity with the millions of people who are living in conflict and grave humanitarian need. This magnificent General Assembly, where we are tonight, this hall is the symbol of our pursuit to improve the conditions of humanity, serving as we should, we the peoples of the United Nations, the first 3 words of the Charter. During the 7 decades since the Charter was written, we have seen many advances for peace, development, and human rights. Yet today, the scale of human suffering is greater than at any time since the organization was founded. A record 130 million people are now dependent on the UN and our partners for their protection and survival from conflict and disaster. And more than 65 million people have been displaced as they flee violence or persecution. It is the highest number since World War II. Half of the displaced are children. Half of them. What life and what future do they have? The needs around us are staggering and hard to comprehend. Yet, they tell only a fraction of the story. Behind every statistics are individuals and families whose lives have been devastated. They are all our fellow human beings with dreams, with aspirations for a different life, a different and a better future. These women, men and children face horrible situations and impossible choices every day. They are parents who must choose between buying food or buying medicine for their children. They are children who can't go to school because their buildings have been destroyed. They are families who must risk bombing and death at home or make a perilous escape by sea and across deserts. Humanitarian workers also must make heartbreaking choices. I think of the nurse in Yemen who has run out of medical supplies and must decide who to treat, who to save. Or the aid workers in South Sudan who cannot feed all of the malnourished children in their camp. I have been engaged in humanitarian work, as Stephen O'Brien mentioned, ever since my time as the first UN Emergency Relief Coordinator in the 90s. And over the years, I've faced impossible choices and unspeakable suffering. I've seen the plight of refugees and victims of floods, earthquakes and drought, not to speak of innumerable innocent victims of warfare. And I've watched the anguish of my colleagues and friends struggling to help people in dangerous and often underfunded operations. Dear friends, earlier this year, 9,000 participants met in Istanbul for the first ever World Humanitarian Summit. World leaders committed to transform the lives of people in acute need in support of the Secretary General's Agenda for Humanity. As we should reflect on the meaning of World Humanitarian Day today and tonight, I think we should recall, and I actually think we should sound the alarm about the barbarity which is taking place every day in different parts of the world. I could highlight a lot of places, but let me, in 1 minute or so, highlight the unspeakable tragedy of Syria. Time and time again, the United Nations has appealed for an end to the killing and destruction. Yet those fighting persist in searching for military victory. And those on the outside are not preventing the violence from reaching new depths of atrocities. The Syrian people are subject to daily horrors, barrel bombs, terrorist acts, chlorine gas attacks, hospital bombings, torture, starvation, siege, desperate flight. In the past 2 days, I believe we have all been haunted by the image of Omran Daknish, Omran, the young boy rescued from the rubble of a bombing in Aleppo. Let us remember that even wars have rules. Let nobody be under any illusion. Today's crimes are being recorded for tomorrow's justice. In Aleppo, we urgently need a ceasefire, or at least sufficient humanitarian pauses to reach the huge number of people in desperate need of food and medical supplies. We now pin our hope on the proposal of Special Envoy de Mistura and OCHA on behalf of the Secretary General to observe a 48-hour humanitarian pause next week. And I call on all parties to support this proposal in order to give the population of Aleppo the relief they so desperately need. I join the Secretary General in urging the Security Council and all actors with influence on the ground to end the hostilities and to make possible political talks. Such talks could finally lead to a transition to peace for the suffering people of Syria. Dear friends, let me end on a more hopeful note. This year we have embarked on a transformative journey to a better future, staked out by last year's achievements by UN member states. A road to a future where no one is forced to make impossible choices. A future where no one is left behind. The UN member states and many others made great progress in Sendai, in Addis, in New York, in Paris, and Istanbul. You committed, and I commend the member states for this, to work for a world of peace and justice, opportunity and dignity for all. But to reach that brighter future, we must all work together. And by the way, together, I think, is the most important word in the world today. We must all work together in solidarity and with passion and compassion. Nothing happens in life without passion, and the wrong things happen without compassion. And the parties that need to come together is governments, parliaments, international organizations, civil society, the private sector, and the scientific academic community. We have an historic opportunity to make progress also at the Summit on Large Movements of Migrants and Refugees in September here in New York, and at Habitat 3 in Quito, Ecuador. On this World Humanitarian Day, let us recognize the world as it is, and it is a troubled place. But let us never forget to strive for the world as it should be. To reduce the gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be is the mission of the United Nations, and I believe the mission for all of us here tonight. I thank you very much.